Guys, Bungie just dropped a huge piece of info on us today, out of the blue, in a string of tweets on Twitter. We got to talk about this because this is literally going to change how you play the game, especially if you're a new player. So tweet one, as a preview of things to come in Lightfall, we have some exciting updates coming soon. Tomorrow, all standard armor mods are unlocked for everyone. With big changes coming to build crafting in Lightfall, we want to give everyone a chance to enjoy all mods in their current state. Now, tomorrow being Wednesday, January the 11th, which is such a random day for them to drop an update like this. And we've mentioned this before in the past about having all mods accessible. We did like an entire video breaking down what Bungie and Destiny needs as an MMO. And one of the big MMO changes was all of the mods available. You shouldn't have to sit there and wait for Ada to have these mods in rotation. Now, the second tweet from Bungie, get ready to focus up. Starting next week, focusing costs for all Trials with Cyrus, Ironbender, Crucible, and Gambit weapons and armor will be reduced to 25 legendary shards. Adept weapon focus costs will also be reduced to 50. A big complaint for a lot of us, especially in the most recent Ironbender, I'm sure most of you spent tons of shards, was the overwhelming costs. Feel bad for you now. Legendary shards aren't necessarily a difficult thing to get for a veteran player, but obviously if you're a new player, dude, the cost is just way too high. So having this reduced from 100 legendary shards to now 25 is insane. And considering that all of our vendors, not just Trials with Cyrus, but Gambit, Crucible, Ironbender, there's so many weapons that we're farming for God rolls for. So if you want that God roll bottom dollar, it's going to be cheaper to focus for those things. Now, don't expect things like Umbral focusing to go down in cost. They really don't cost that much as it is. It's like a single Umbral Ingram and 10 legendary shards. Granted, you're not necessarily focusing a single weapon through the war table, right? For instance, like Arsenal of the Dreaming City, it contains 1 of 7 weapons from the Dreaming City versus being able to directly go to a vendor and focus a specific weapon. But keeping that in mind, 25 legendary shards is a hell of a deal. Now, tweet number 3, Grandmaster Nightfalls arrive on January the 17th, and in our next update, the Grandmaster power cap and structure will become more approachable for all players, while remaining some of our most challenging content. More details coming in this week's TWAB. That's right, guys, Bungie's first TWAB of the year will be back this Thursday. I do want to talk about that last point especially, but let's dissect some of these things first. Mods, again, as of tomorrow, everyone will have access to all of the mods, and this includes Charged with Light, Elemental Wells, and Warmind Cell mods, and pretty much all the standard mods. No more waiting on 81 to carry that one mod that you need for that specific build. And this happens so many times because in so many of our build videos, I get comments like, Cross, I don't have that mod. Could I change it out for something else? And I'm like, dude, actually you can't, because you need that mod for this specific build. But again, starting tomorrow, everything will be available. Now, this will exclude raid mods as clarified from community manager Hippie on Twitter. Raid mods will still have to be earned in their designated raids. Now, what does Bungie mean when they say we want to give everyone a chance to enjoy all the mods in their current state? They didn't just say, hey, we want you to get the chance to play with certain builds or enjoy certain mods here on out. They said in their current state. This actually brings us to August the 13th during the Destiny Massive Breakdown podcast in regards to combat mods. At about 2 hours and 34 minutes, if you actually want to check that out, Mercules actually stated that this isn't really a weapons area, but Warmind cells have had their time in the meta, and we have changes coming to these systems in Lightfall. Now, there is a variety of things we could speculate here. Does this mean our combat mods are being changed? Yes. Some have even said that Lightfall, literally the name Lightfall, means losing our light. But I would argue and say another huge change, something that would cripple everyone's builds, and I don't know if Bungie would do this or not because this would be a bold move, is removing all mods, all Charged with Light mods, all Elemental Well mods, even our Warmind Cell mods. And I know Warmind Cells are definitely not something that we're like jumping to make builds for, but could we potentially see a world in which all of these mods are deprecated? Now that would be sad. Even if we're not dealing with like the most meta version of Warmind Cells, it would be a head scratcher for me considering we just got the bow hierarchy of needs, and the bow literally synergizes with Warmind Cells. Doesn't create them naturally, but it can create them with certain Warmind Cell mods. And on top of that, if you actually break a Warmind Cell with hierarchy of needs, with that hipfire shots, it creates an even bigger guidance ring. And by the way, I know no one is really jumping up to just get this bow, and we talked about it a while back. At the end of the day, I do want to mention something about this bow. It's the highest primary DPS damage in the game. Sure, it may not have the utility that TQ's Divination has or some of our other exotic bows, and we did an entire breakdown on this, but in terms of damage, especially day one raids, when you've expended all of your heavy and special ammo and all you have is a primary weapon, there's a reason why if you didn't have Outbreak perfected day one for Caretaker from Vow the Disciple, you would not be able to get through that raid, or it would be extremely tough. You needed primary primary damage. So I'm just keeping in mind here, guys, hierarchy of needs is a very useful bow for those specific scenarios. Now, it just wouldn't make sense to me to just remove Warmind cells completely from the game, considering the synergy we have here with hierarchy of needs. And on top of that, we just got Ikelos weapons back. Now, what this could possibly mean is that the changes coming into these systems in Lightfall could be the removal of elemental affinities. All of these Warmind cell mods and Charged with Light mods and elemental mods, they all require certain elemental affinities, which is why Destiny Item Manager is such a useful tool. Being able to save your build and not only share it out to people, but save specifically the elemental affinities for each of those mods. You need a manager like Dim to do those things for you, or it's a nightmare remembering what mod goes where. Now, we do know at some point, and I think it's going to be when Lightfall releases, we're going to get an in-game item manager. So instead of relying on Destiny Item Manager, which I think some of us still will, but in-game, we're going to be able to actually save our builds. And this is a huge thing. You see it on things like Final Fantasy, where you could save builds. And this is such a massive move because with a single click of a button, you could change your entire build. And things like Final Fantasy, you just change your entire class with a single click of a button. So to include that in Destiny, that's another way Bungie's really pushing this game to becoming that MMORPG that we know it can be, but it needs those features. If Bungie was to remove elemental affinities, I would argue and say saving builds would be much easier to do in game. And maybe that's been causing some of the problems that we've been running into with Destiny Item Manager going down. Maybe all of these things on the back end have been changed or in the process of getting to that change. And that's why we've been experiencing things like network errors, APIs going down, all that stuff. So best case scenario, all of our armor mods going into the future will have elemental affinities removed. And by the way, this isn't the first time Bungie has done this. Bungie has done this many times. They have taken a system, overcomplicated it, made it even more complicated, and have continually simplified it year over year. It's just like with weapon crafting. When it first came out, we had like a ton of different items required for crafting a weapon, and then they suddenly realized, okay, this is way too complicated, and they consolidated, hence why we're down to neutral elements now. So best case scenario, they remove elemental affinities. Worst case scenario, Bungie's letting us play with all these builds and mods because they're gonna kill them next season. Now, I would say that is awful, but if you want a way to nerf what they've done with 3.0 subclasses, I guess that's one way to do it. But man, you gotta have a system replace that, because one of the best things we have in Destiny is build crafting. So I hope that's not the case. I'm throwing that out there because we need to be aware of the possibilities. Destiny Content Vault sunsetting, all those things became a reality, and some of us saw those things coming. And as outlandish as it sounded at the time, like, hey guys, we're about to have all of our weapons that we previously earned suddenly not usable in in-game content. And everybody's like, nah, that's not gonna happen. And then we're like, yeah, oh, Tangle Shore is leaving. These strikes are leaving. These PvP maps are going. So it's not the first time this has happened. That's all I'm saying. Again, worst case scenario, I hope it doesn't happen. All right, now let's talk about Grandmaster Nightfalls. How will Bungie make Grandmaster Nightfalls approachable to all players, but continue to keep them difficult? Now, the system we've seen implemented with the seasonal activity heist battlegrounds is probably what Bungie is actually planning to implement to overhaul power level requirements. Instead of requiring you to hit a certain level to even attempt a Grandmaster Nightfall, I actually think we're just always going to be capped at 25 power below the recommended power level. And this would remove a major hassle that keeps many players from even attempting GMs. Granted, guys, if you are not even at that power threshold, the minimum power threshold for Grandmaster Nightfalls, oh boy, you're about to be humble. GMs don't play, man. Everything. A Dreg coughing on you will kill you. A Thrall barely bumps into you and you're dead. Granted, GMs have gotten easier with certain builds and of course 100 resilience, but it's still very difficult. And it's definitely not something I would tackle under level, at least to that minimum threshold. The only other system I can see Bungie adding here would be matchmaking, but I don't see that happening until we get LFG in the game. Granted, for years now, I've just been saying, Bungie, open matchmaking and everything, let it happen. I know we're getting LFG at some point, but just open matchmaking up. You know, in most other MMORPGs, you either burn or you fly. That's it. Did it get toxic sometimes? Sure. Did somebody jump into the party chat and say, hey man, you're throwing. You're causing this entire team to wipe over and over. Why, yes, that did happen. A lot. And it built character. It made you stronger. And eventually, we all got past the finish line. Opening up matchmaking is something that Bungie has been avoiding for a very long time. Again, in-game LFG is coming at some point, so we don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case. Either way it goes, Thursday, expect more details in the twab. This is going to be a juicy one. Big changes coming out, guys. Again, for those that are curious about certain builds, we literally made like 30 build videos last year, including some more this year. We love making builds. I actually got an ARC build right now we're making coming out this week. It's disgusting. The beautiful thing about all these builds, you will now have mods to complete them if you have not already acquired all those mods. So for my new light players or anybody joining the game for the first time, these mods will be unlocked for you tomorrow. Try them out, guys. Build crafting is a wonderful part of Destiny. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.